Want to welcome everyone to our webinar. If it's really a webinar or if it's kind of a webcast podcast type of thing, because we're changing this time a bit how we run this compared to other webinars that we do. We typically have a moderator. Today I'm taking the role of the moderator, but I'll also be participating in the discussions and conversations, and we'll really try to make this feel like an easy discussion between like-minded people, between people who know a little bit about digitization and the logistics space, who have opinions. So I'm super curious to get started. I'm super happy to have Nikolaus here. Nikolaus is Director of Customer Engagement at Solvo AI. And we have Marty Leitert here, who is Key Account Manager for A&C at Gebrüder Weiss, which is a transport and logistics company that's further advanced in the digital space. I'm super excited to have you guys here as external people, but also very, very excited to have Franzi here, Franziska Stahlmann, who is a lead product manager here at the Container Exchange, and who's been building for the past years at Exchange, but also before her time at Exchange, software for transport and logistics companies. So again, welcome to everyone. My name is Leonard. I'm VP of Product here at Exchange. For the past 5 years, I've been building software for logistics, building software that enables specifically small and medium-sized companies to digitize parts of their operations. Without further ado, let's get started. And maybe I introduced all of you already, and I see that our team is sharing our LinkedIn profiles here. So want to get everyone browsing here, and want to encourage everyone to post questions in the chat. We're going to address them throughout the session or after the session. But perhaps Marty, Nikolaus, Franzi, can you all introduce yourselves once more? Give a little bit more flavor to my introduction before we dig into digitalization. And you guys can sort out who wants to start.
Cool. Maybe I'll just get started. So hi everyone. My name is Nikolaus. I'm super glad to be here. Excited for the conversation. So I have a background in freight forwarding. Started off as an operator, and then moved more and more into the digital side of things. And then few years left to work actually on the tech side. What excites me or what got me into the space is it's a super exciting industry because it's an intangible industry that manages tangible flows, which I find extremely exciting. And this conversation for me is particularly exciting because it's for me in logistics, tech obviously plays a big role. And in my opinion, the industry is somewhat underserviced when it comes to tech. It's really interesting. I'm really curious to discuss about that today. And thanks for everybody to be here. Who's going next?
Yeah, Franzi, huh? Lady.
Sorry, I went first. Yeah,
you unmuted yourself, but I can go ahead. Yes. Yeah, so my name is Franzi, exactly. As Leonard said, I have been around in like different startups around logistics and transportation for some time. I started my career at Mercedes-Benz Trucks, and that was already like the first time I felt like, oh my goodness, there's so much we can change and do with software and with like improving processes and so on. And then at one point I moved to Berlin, where like you find the big startups, and spent some more time in trucking before I joined seeing air freight a bit more before to back then. And I'm very, very happy to be with Exchange, because I think for me it's a great opportunity to just not look at like how can we make things better for freight forwarders, but actually like what can we do as a service provider on for all these different parties involved in this process. So that's something that I feel that's very challenging and exciting. So I'm very happy to have that discussion today to see what we can do for the people involved. So Marty, this time too.
Yes, yeah, great. And I would say now almost over than 50 years, logistics is steering my professional world and life. And I'm having joined this industry because I believe from outside you would never imagine how complex and diverse this industry can be. So once you have been in, right, you are really immediately being passionate up, and to try to connect the people and to make also logistics definitely more hassle-free worldwide. And I almost have been to a large extent always in customer-facing roles. So speaking to SMEs, but also from a freight forwarder perspective, but also in the carrier environment, and driving and pushing also through digitalization. So and this also makes me join today's webinar as well, or discussion, right? To also have a discussion with like-minded people about digitalization. I believe also the next minutes ahead will be very engaging discussions.
Yeah, and it's something you said struck my mind, because when I joined Exchange a couple of years back, and Christian Johannes told me about the idea, and I mean, the whole thing didn't really exist yet. Told me about the idea, was looking at them coming from really like digital industries, and I was like, wait, but this can't be new. Like, you guys can't be serious. This must be out there. So I did my research and figured out, okay, wait, there's nobody actually focusing on enabling SMEs and helping them digitize. And Marty, I know you're very, very passionate about that. You're passionate about digitization for SMEs, specifically LSPs, but also BCOs. What are key challenges from your perspective, key challenges for SMEs, but also advantages from digitizing?
Yeah, I believe overall, when it comes to digitalization, no matter if it's been logistics or what kind of other industry, I believe the typical challenge for all of us is definitely the willingness, right, to change habits, right, to transform also processes. No matter if we are speaking about partners, suppliers, or also customers, or even peers, right? We are working with, engaging all the time. So it's really like moving the trust, right, from offline to the online space, and there's always a sort of a fear to fail mentality, which is a sort of as a road blocker in our mind. So this is definitely like the most typical challenge, right? Going from offline to online, going out of the comfort zone of changing and transforming processes, and we see it already, right? Also currently taking place, right, in the current economy and situation, right? We are in with all the various factors that. Right, the current challenge for SMEs and also all parties involved is definitely like to balance, right, between the so-called supply chain resilience and but also on the other hand, right, the efficiency, effectiveness we are in, because we are a very fast-paced environment. So this is like currently, right, a very big challenge at the moment, where companies really looking for efficiency and effectiveness, while to look on the resilience part. And but this is also, right, the opportunity to save time, right, because we all see, right, a lot of processes and steps are being manual. So let's dig into and try and look and have a look, okay, where we can remove or make manual processes redundant, right? Because if we save time, we save money, right? And this is also where we are in, definitely how we can increase efficiencies. And with that, it's also nice to see that we create data points, we make data visible, and this also brings them value also to the stakeholders, right? We also need to communicate and engage with in our company. So yeah, so it's definitely a lot right now going on, which is not really easy to grab, right? To say, okay, this is the holy grail.
And Nicolas, like comparing that to leading companies in the industry, like are the challenges the same? Are they experiencing same challenges, obstacles in digitization?
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked for a long time for one of the largest LSPs in the industry. Now I also work with SMEs more. So generally, there's obviously some of the challenges are similar. I'm picking up from Marty some points, right? So he's talking about people, change management, and also about data. I think with larger organizations, there's obviously some challenges around, there's more legacy, there's more complexity also of finding users to speak to understand what is needed, and then to roll things out. There are more layers, so much more complex organizations. There's definitely some opportunities for larger organizations in terms of business process outsourcing. So it's easier to centralize certain processes, where in smaller organizations that might not be possible. And also I think data is a big point, right? So large organizations have an abundance of data that they can source from, that they can use especially for new, for predictive, prescriptive analytics. That's definitely something, where they might have an edge. So these are just, some areas I can think of.
And like, what do you think will be the outcomes if like this industry doesn't scale digitally and seamlessly together? Curious about your outlook here.
Yeah, so you're asking me. So I think the industry needs to scale, and for me, digital is the way forward, right? In logistics, everything is about managing information. Of course, it's a people business, but it's an information management business. So systems are absolutely crucial. I read some reports where, it's a $10 trillion industry, and it's estimated that around $2 trillion are associated to inefficiencies based on lack of digitalization, right? So this is obviously pretty big, and there's a need for companies to shift from what Marty also mentioned, more focus on efficiency, to going much more, into resilience, agility, sustainability. These are the big buzzwords that people are talking about now, but these are also the problems that we're facing, right? There's some reports, again, I think it was McKinsey, they're stating that there's every 3.5 years, there's going to be major disruptions that will be a month or longer, right? So that's pretty significant. And in order to deal with that, we need digital advancement and better connectivity in the industry. Otherwise, we have no chance of addressing areas like we saw during the pandemic also, when it comes to bottlenecks, shortages, right? Equipment imbalances that you see globally, inventory issues from bullwhip effects and so on, right? So a lot of that can only be solved digitally. And so it's a big deal.
Crazy considering those numbers, that the amount that goes into inefficiencies being greater than some of the market caps of the biggest companies out there. Just mind blowing.
Crazy, right? Yeah, of numbers. I agree.
So we see digitization happen across the supply chain. What we notice as exchanges that specifically freight forwarding is noticeably falling behind. And just asking this into the full round, and maybe starting with Franzi, why do you think that's the case? Why is it freight forwarding that's lacking behind in terms of digitization here?
I think it's really us because of this fragmented market, as you mentioned this before, right? So I saw this on smaller scale also with trucking, where also a lot of things actually, like in Europe, right, has been super undigitalized for a very, very long time. And that has been exactly also to the fact that it's very small companies that somehow, connected to your partners. They have their networks, right? They have their relationships to each other, and that somehow works for a very long time. And as long as no one really has to do the move of like, hey, but I'm digitalizing now, like I'm pulling you with me into this. As long as that industry just stands still, right? How are people supposed to then move into that direction? So I think that's something where, as a bigger group, basically, in the end, we're standing still for quite some time. I see Marty, you're nodding.
Yeah, just particular, right? Well, because I'm not really agreeing that the logistics of freight forwarding environment falls behind. Because first, right, to look on the priorities forwarders have, right? The forwarders are spokespersons, right, of the customers. So, well, this is the top and the first priority. And on the other hand, right, forwarders are agile, right? We need to provide solutions all the time. So, well, it's sort of looks like from outside it's more. It have been maybe more reactive than proactive, but at the end, the logistics industries or the freight forwarders overall, right, they're being the spokespersons of the customers, and they act and try to react also in the sense of the supply chains. So that's why it always, or it might have a sort of a glimpse that it looks a little bit not innovative, but the other way around, right? If you look also the past 3-4 years, right, what also the pandemic and other stuff have been a tremendous turbocharger, right? To make use digitalization as a tool, right? To steer those supply chain challenges around, and I know all in all. Also, when we ask our customers, and this is always our first priorities, right, as logistics people, looking from outside to inside, is that, well, what what is driving the customers, our contacts, and it's still right. You would not imagine. It's still they like to speak to people. They like to writing emails. While it is a love and a hate function in that sense, but this is what we also still see, that while we are speaking about digitalization, still we are humans and the people, and we sort of still want to get hands-on and have to somebody to speak to, because also those are the most commoditized and standardized ways of communication. And but still, we have been realizing also in our industry, and also the customers also have been very quickly picking up that digitalization is a must to make it more easier, to make it to also to stay up front of the sort of information chains. And so that's why digitalization, I believe, is definitely sort of a big tool, right, to move forward. And last but not least, well, we are also in that round, right? We are humans. We are speaking about at the end, no human, no trust, means like, okay, we need to have our advocates also in the world of digitalization, and I believe then we can make it work. Definitely, I believe. Sure, I believe it's some like called in some ways of centimeters or millimeters or meters, where some are behind or more upfront. But at the end, I believe it's a very agile environment, and it also provides a breeding ground for all of us, right, to make something different in the digital space.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in there. So Marty, I know also, so you talk about standardization a lot, and in our pre-discussion we also had some chat around agility versus standardization, and wanted to pick up maybe also what Franziska said around the market being very fragmented, right? So I feel like logistics service providers are very much dependent also on their surroundings. They're very much kind of crunched between BCOs and carriers, right? So they're very dependent also on what these two parties do, what information they can provide, and also very much, I would say, dependent on regulatory and sort of industry bodies, right, that help with standardizing the industry across all these fragmented parties. So, I mean, just to name, obviously, we all know IATA and DCSA, right? In air, they may have done a better job, or they may be a little bit further ahead when it comes to Cargo 2000, or I think it's called Cargo IQ now, right, where you have the standardized route maps, which we don't really see so much in ocean yet, which I'm always a little bit surprised about, right? I'd love to see more of that. But yeah, I think standardization is a big topic. Yeah, and maybe Marty, what's your point? Yeah, kind of you're a little bit more also on the BCO side. Do you feel like BCOs might also play a role in impacting digitalization for LSPs?
Yeah, definitely, right? Because I believe the largest corporate companies, right, they also move the largest volumes on Earth, right? If you look on the cargo flows, so definitely they will always have a large violin to play when it comes on, okay, how supply chains and also innovation have to be working around. But if we then take the bridge to the SMEs, the small and medium-sized companies, well, they are, I would say, more open also to try and test when they have also a helping hand, right, to take them on a specific journey. But all in all, right, we see the customers also on the BCO side, definitely, right? Their cargo or their products, they are customized, and also their supply chains are also customized then along their product journey. So that's why we, as a logistics industry, we always will have sort of a limit on how much we can standardize. Standardization is important to be efficient, but there will be always a sort of percentage range where it is tailor-made, where it is customized, because then it's also built and based on the product cycle itself. So if we try to go 100% of standardization, well, we will most probably lose the sort of agility and flexibility. But definitely standardization is important, but it's always based on the supply chain itself, to what kind of extent you can standardize. And this is definitely one of the challenges, right? We also, as a logistics industry, have, okay, how much we can standardize it. And but yeah, well, but it's also the beauty, right, we are in, to have a look on this, all right? But
I'm actually curious, Nikolaus, what digital roadblocks and hesitations do you actually encounter in the industry? So maybe adding to what Marty said, if you agree or if you see something else.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, to pick up what Marty said, right? I definitely agree. You can't over standardize everything. You need to leave room for individualism, and also for people, right? So I think people play a big role. I think there's some general things that frustrate me a little bit, and when it comes to digital roadblocks. So for instance, what I see quite a lot is people, installing systems and not really paying much attention to the processes. In my opinion, you really need to go the other way around. You need to look at like what processes do you need, what do people do, who interacts, and then you build a system, right, to enable that, instead of putting a system and then everybody has to work around that system. For me, it's the wrong way around. Similar, with data and decisions, people look at what data do I have, and then they look at what decisions can I enable, versus the other way around, right? You want to look at what decisions do I need to support for my people, and then I look at what data do I need in order to enable that, right? But yeah, so these are kind of some fundamental things for me. And one thing, again, going back to the people, for me, it's really important that people have confidence in systems, right? And that requires a certain design of systems, and also requires not to close yourself off from manual processes, right? People will continue to work in Excel and email. That's not necessarily bad. You need to make that compatible with your systems, right? And you cannot have two different worlds. So for me, that's really important. And these are some roadblocks that I see, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, Marty,
Yeah,
go ahead.
and it is a really good point around Nicholas here really mentioned, right? We are very all the time very quick into, okay, this is the solution, this is a product, and make it go and make it run. Yeah, quite often, right, we just miss out, okay, who are the users? What should be the benefit? What should be also the value? And this is also some of the success criteria of the digitalization, right? At the end, it must be user friendly. It must also bring the value, and it needs to give also the tool and the support, right, we are looking for. Otherwise, well, it's like a dead duck, right?
And I love this, because this is like my bread and butter in terms of building software products. It's about figuring out what people really need, understanding their processes, and then designing the systems around it. We too often see the opposite, and then these systems will fail. And maybe considering our audience want to go a little bit deeper on container operations. What are sort of manual processes that you all experienced firsthand, where you were shocked that these are still in use, where you couldn't imagine that can be reality still in 2023 we have already now?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump on this quickly, right? So and no offense to how carriers do their business, but I've been speaking to some colleagues, who were much more engaged 30 years back, 20 years back in the logistics world, and they came back into the space and they realized, oh my God, things are still done exactly the same way, right? I mean, information exchange, for instance, between carriers and LSPs when it comes to rates and invoices, right? We all know that, it's really difficult to integrate rate sheets. But also when it comes to schedules, a lot of it should be exchanged via EDI or APIs these days. But in reality, a lot of it, also happens on locally on spreadsheets again. And one thing that really strikes me is for instance, the carrier booking confirmation exchange. So, there's a claim of things being exchanged electronically, but in reality, in a lot of markets, like in China, carriers send booking confirmations with a PDF via an email, right? And so some of these processes are really, really difficult to get a hold of. So these are some things that puzzle me a little bit. I mean, another topic in freight forwarding is all about right, an export and an import office. So I'm also sometimes a little shocked to see lack of connectivity between those two, and this goes for large organizations as much as for smaller ones. Obviously, for smaller ones, more difficult because you have to deal with agents. But yeah, there's really a lack of connectivity, and people work in their own system, and then everything that they exchange with an agent or with another office comes in on email, and they have to, copy paste things into their own system, which is also, for me, surprising that we still work in this way. Sorry to say.
I would like to add to that, Nicolas, because that was something I was also, every time I see something like this, every time I jump into this topic again, right, I'm again surprised, although I see this now for some years. I think what add to this was for me a moment when I realized that still like they exchange all these emails and like the communication you just mentioned, right? And if one person in this process somehow like, I don't know, gets on sick leave or something, the whole system breaks apart, right? It's very personal connected, right? It's like personal emails very often, and they have few replace like people that take care in case of something happening, right? So it's very like personalized, which makes that even more risky in the end.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and it brings back also to the matter of trust, right? And I just also can confirm it, right? We still also see a lot of people, right, exchanging emails on certain container events or track and trace status, right? But well, so we still see, right, people more trusting sort of the information flowing from an email, while on systems of digital track and trace products out there, because still they have sort of well concerns. Well, is the data true or not? And this is also the success criteria of digitalization. But definitely, I can prove it that yeah. Still, right, also in 2023, there are a lot of emails going forth and back about informations, well, where you sort of believe those conversations could have been already killed down 10 emails earlier, right? Because just the information is already somewhere online available, but still it's a lack of trust, or is the data accurate, right? But again, this is also the beauty, right? On why we are doubting the data is not correct or is correct, right?
I think in some areas, obviously, it's about exchanging information more efficiently, right? If you can exchange information from system to system as much as you can, that's great. But I think still we should not disregard the need for communication between people as well in this business, right? Especially when it comes to exceptions, it's very important. And I'm sometimes very surprised to see how systems are not very much designed to cater for that communication between people, because there are great systems out there. There are tools that you can use, right? And at least, you know, a lot of the systems that I've seen don't pay so much attention to it, which I find a little bit sad.
Yeah,
It's a very interesting point. Oh, sorry, Leonard.
No, I just wanted to say, totally agree. That's why like everything we build comes with a chat, because we realize very quickly, hey, wait, you can't cut out the human out of this. But we're gonna transition into like a very quick break and poll in a few minutes. Before we do that, one thing I would just love to get like your perspective on, Franzi, is how you exactly this problem that Marty and Nicolas were talking about, how you in your product work synthesize human and machine. So essentially connecting those two to enable then the humans to eventually provide a more satisfactory customer service to the end customers. What do you do? What's your best practice, so to say? It's going to you, Franzi.
Oh, sorry. I was somehow listening and wondering what the others would say. Yeah, I mean, we touched upon a few of those topics beforehand, right? So first of all, there are certain steps that are just like let's put a container export journey, right? There are certain milestones that container journey is gonna pass, right? So these things, they need to be digital. These information need to be available. And then what Nicolas just said before, at one point things go wrong, right? So making sure that customers actually have transparency, or like that's in a good product, right? That we have a product that shows you like that's the flow how it should be, but then actually be alerted on something is going off here, and then giving then the human being really the possibility to act on this, right? They know usually very fast themselves, who do I need to contact? What's going on here? How do I solve a certain issue? There are tons of things that could happen, thousands of situations that would have to be handled. And I think that's exactly where we came to the point before, right? That's exactly the point where human can actually really resolve a lot of things very fast. I think we should focus on moving people more to like solving those issues, and by this providing a great customer experience. They focus on this instead of having very time consuming, error prone, like over typing tasks in a day-to-day. I think that's what would make a better product in the end, or like a better customer service.
And that summarizes for me really well that that's what, for me personally, digitization is all about: enabling humans to be more efficient, to have a more desirable job, to have less stress in their day-to-day. And in a few minutes, we're going to go and talk about some actual solutions and digital tools in our space. But first, want to conduct a quick feedback round. So you see a link here coming up, a menti.com link, where you can click on, and you can ask questions. You can let us know which digital processing and processes and platforms you've had success with. And Marty, Franzi, Nikolaus, this is this interactive tool. So they digitized polls for webinars already, and we're gonna see here some of the things floating in. I wanna encourage anyone to react in case things will be floating in. I'm trying this tool Menti for the first time here. Would love to see some of the audience engage. Link was just posted again. And while we go into this, any tools that you guys already use? I mean, obviously, Nikolaus, you've been building tools for the industry. Feel free to give a 1 minute pitch on how your tool actually helps industry players.
Yeah, I mean, so the solution that we're offering at the minute, right? It's an optimization engine. We're very focused on helping, and it goes a little bit in line with what we will talk about here in a minute, right? But it helps very much. It helps very much to go from a static sort of an inside out approach to more of a dynamic approach. I mean, one area that we're focused on right now is pricing, but it could be other things as well, right? So we're very much trying to support users with recommendations, with suggestions that are generated through reinforcement learning, which is machine learning, part of machine learning. But yeah, it's very much, you know, about about supporting the human. So about the collaboration between machine and human, and we're also explaining to the human, right, why certain things have been recommended. And in pricing, it's very important to be more dynamic, right? This sort of inside out approach is a bit outdated, and
that's what we saw as well. That pricing is huge, has huge potential for digitization. Now we see actually a couple of things coming up, and love to see things like Azure Cloud. So tools that are not just primarily built for logistics, but that can be utilized. We see Project 44 coming up, and we touched upon that, right? Just make data available, give people data up front, don't have them search for the data, overtype it. Don't know if you guys recognize any tools that you can say something about. Love to see the Exchange Marketplace, of course.
Of course, a lot of them are very, very, I think what's really also critical is, I mean, a lot of them are really like big systems, right? For me, it's really important also to find systems that make information actionable, right? So going back to like helping the user, obviously, you know, CargoWise is so big, and they have so many different modules, right, that go across. Project 44, I mean, we've been working with them for a long time, also previously with Ocean Insights. Again, right, it's a critical piece. But for me also with some of these areas, it's very important to then also find ways of making that information actionable, right? Even CargoWise, I've never been a CargoWise user, but for me, you know, it's critical next to TMS modules to also have a really good kind of workflow approach, right? So a workflow system that combines different modules. You know, you can go for a modular approach also with systems and use different systems for different purposes, but it's very important to bring them together, right, in sort of a workflow in an end-to-end process for users. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense to me.
So enough responses on the
yeah, I think that's enough for the responses. I can essentially share a little story about, like you mentioned CargoWise and these huge IT systems. So we spoke about actually systems being designed in a way that people need to change the way they're working and adopt these systems. We as a company did the same, introducing enterprise software as we scaled, and we just saw how challenging it is to implement the software into a company, into a culture, and how lengthy such a process can be, even for a very agile tech-focused company like ours.
Yeah, it's kind of this discussion, monolith versus modular approach, right? And it has pros and cons, but for me, I'm a big fan of going a little bit more modular because it allows you also to change individual modules quicker, right? It makes you a little bit more dynamic, I would say, in the way that,
Yeah, as we transition now into solutions, I want to briefly mention a study that our team completed, and we got input from a little bit over 1,000 different people from the logistics space, primarily freight forwarders. And they told us that they're actually spending 2 to 4 hours every day fixing problems. That's like half a working day, 2 to 4 hours a day fixing problems. That's and then another 8 hours a week would go into actually sourcing transportation partners, negotiating terms, prices. You mentioned actually prices are something that can be aided, or price negotiation can be aided through technology as well. And retrieving critical information. So actually, a lot of the things we spoke about also are reflected in what our study showed that we've done across the industry. And for me personally, a lot of these problems go back to inefficient operational processes, fragmented information flow, and data. So in terms of digitization of 3PLs, I think they can begin to utilize digital technologies. Would love to hear your opinion for some specific parts of their operation. So I believe in the space of planning, so booking management, sourcing and booking transport services like containers, freight, trucks, comparing rates, getting price information, actually making good business decisions, and managing critical to-dos. I think those are all things where you wouldn't need a monolith approach to digitize that. There are great tools out there that can support. And then really the space of receiving and distributing critical information, where I see huge potential for digitization is making critical information and related documents available to our stakeholders. So we just heard these stories of, hey, then documents are still shared as a PDF, inside an email as an attachment, into private email account of, not private, but personal email account within some person within the company. So it seems like companies don't have a single source of truth for a booking or for the process. And I believe that there is space for digitization. We saw Project 44 on the poll. I think tracking containers, getting ETAs is also something that should be automatic and that should be available at any point of time for any freight forwarder, and they shouldn't be running around across sort of websites and track and trace systems to chase down that information if a shipper needs that information. And then I think having all of this, you can set up automated alerts for critical steps. So get people out of firefighting mode, actually get them in front of the problems. So really, for receiving and distributing critical information, for me personally, it's all about ultimately keeping an overview of all container moves, all related information in one single place, and actually having that information available there. And then maybe lastly, where I also see potential for digitization is invoicing and controlling invoices. And this is really something that I only learned as I started working with Container Exchange, how challenging it is for different service providers along the value chain to invoice their partners, to retrieve payments, but also to check invoices whether they are actually correct. Because again, they don't have all this data available in one place to just say, hey, I got this invoice, be it from a shipping line, and I have to pay demurrage and detention. I'm not so sure whether those charges are correct, or be it on an SOC container where you have per diems and you don't really know when that container was returned, down to should repass, etc. And I think that's where we have a lot of potential.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
Things are all connected, right? I mean, it's okay to use different modules, but you need to connect them well. Like for instance, you talk about invoicing. You can't check your invoices if you don't have your buying rates properly recorded, right? So that's kind of where the problem starts. I just wanted to make a point. I think for me, what's extremely important in all of this is master data, right? Because that's where a lot of the problems start. And you can start with just recording master data for your customers. Who is my customer? What promise have I made to them? Who are the people that I'm speaking to, right? When do they expect certain tasks to be performed? If these things are not properly recorded and then spread across different modules or across different systems, you have a big problem, right? So this is sort of, for me, it's a key. And I've seen a lot of organizations that are unfortunately not very good at managing master data, and they don't understand the value and the importance of it, unfortunately.
And Marty, does that resonate to you? Did you do something in that space already?
Definitely, because well, I see the freight forwarder space also when it comes on billing and invoicing. It's also a big thing in our industry, also towards our clients. That I believe the freight forwarders are the largest translators of converting those very crappy charge lines, which are occurring the whole supply chain. What kind of surcharges we all have been seeing the past decade, right? I believe if you would write a book, it have been already, I'm not sure, 500-600 pages or whatever. So definitely this is also a huge capacity, right, behind it also in our space to also make invoicing or the billing part also understood and also seamless. I believe also, for example, in US, it's also a big industry of having billing and invoices corrected, right? This is then you see already the value. Okay, what how important it is also that the billing and invoicing part is also being as much as streamlined and also understood. But also comes back also what Nicholas mentioned. It's all about also the master data, right? Of having all the information at one place, and then to also take that kind of information and to convert it and also right in the service build on an invoice. This is definitely and it continues to be binding a lot of resources also in the logistics service provider space.
I think on top of the master data, right, it's also like, where is the single point of truth, right? Especially if you use several systems at the same time, where do you keep everything updated? Or where is your point of truth in the end? How much effort do you want to spend on like overwriting data from one tool to the other, or like where do you rely on things, right? And then also across, like, I don't know, like a freight forwarding company with, I don't know, several offices over the world, right? They need to choose for a specific tool where they have this truth. And that's going a bit back to like what I've seen, but I saw a lot of companies in the end where the people itself that had their own like master sheet with their master data and their master overview, a mini TMS spreadsheet in the end, which is something that, yeah, probably something for the future to see how long it takes to, yeah, digitalize this and connect us properly. Maybe.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Franzi.
I was just wondering, so just Marty, because you also worked as a freight forwarder before, right? Yourself. What's the benefit of digitalizing the network aspect, right? There's so many people involved, so how can we approach this topic?
First of all, right, it comes back, okay, how we can become much more efficient, right? So reducing manual steps. Well, looking on, okay, how also things have been improving also on the digital space, on how data also is being connected. We see also still a fragmentation going on, right? We now add to the logistics complexity, also the complexity of digital tools and systems. So, well, if you look back 10 years ago, right, we to a large extent just in the logistics world, people had to deal with people, and maybe 2-3 tools to manage also the supply chain. Well, I believe now it's like still the same people trying to manage the supply chain, plus the additional now tools also to serve, right, to satisfy. It's also like yeah, one operator also needs to deal with 10 or more tools or digital products to make that information available, or to also to push that information. So well, while we make it more visible and transparent, it's still it also not right now really also reducing the manual steps. It just changes the manual steps and importance. But so we still need to continue also in our industry to, while we are providing manual data, to also think one step forward. Okay, is it really necessary to have that step of process tomorrow still also manual? So, and this is also where, right, digitalization also comes into play, because one thing we have to deal with the carriers, and the other way around, we also have to deal with BCO system applications. So, and we are still in between, and you cannot fix everything by APIs, but it should be the vision and mission that things definitely can be automated much better.
And that's interesting. And maybe to you, Nikolaus, as someone from the tech space, what sort of processes would you like to see aligned and synthesized in regard to that? And what would you like to maybe detach or decompartmentalize?
Yeah, I think there's a number of examples, right? So, for instance, I mean, a process that's really very dear to my heart is the booking process, where you have a shipment booking from the customer, and then you have a carrier booking, right? As Marty mentioned, these two, in my opinion, need to be detached, right? There needs to be a flexible way of matching them, and you manage your allocation with the carrier, and you manage your demand on the other side. You flexibly match them. Way too attached, that process, right? It needs to be much more detached. Another one, you know, that's kind of interesting to me here is people are very focused on, I believe, operations in freight forwarding. Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, but oftentimes I see it's still very focused on a single shipment. One person operates a single shipment. In my opinion, we need to start looking at tasks, and you handle tasks, whether they're associated with one shipment or the other, doesn't matter so much, right? So you need to start looking at tasks and due dates for certain activities rather than focusing on shipments. And that will also allow you to outsource certain processes, which is not a bad thing, right? It's a good thing. Documentation processes, for instance, right, can be detached, can be outsourced. So yeah, these are some areas I think that would be a key for me, right, to look at.
Yeah, definitely, if the quality is there, right, and it also comes back to, okay, how much customized or tailor-made are the supply chains? So we are then the ones trying to as much as consolidate or standardize the task, but still there will be always like 10-20% of non-standardized operations, because still it's a customized supply chain. But definitely, right, well, this is our day-to-day job, right, on how to increase efficiency, and also not all the time looking on the single job, right? So looking on the specific journey, specific vessel, specific flight, whatever, or specific truck. But again, when it comes also down to the breakdown, there's always a sort of a threat or risk that information also can, somewhere fall under the desk. But again, it's just 80%. You definitely should strive for standardization, definitely.
Yeah.
I think I have one more question going to Nikolaus. Do you have some, so I mean, I guess we have some freight forwarding companies now here who listen to us like for the past 48 minutes and thinking about digitalization, right? Do you have some vision or structure like how they can start becoming or going digital, something that they can start off with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I think that we mentioned along the way already, right? So we talked very much about user process focused system design, right? Going more for a modular approach than possibly a monolith, right? I mean, one thing also I've seen a lot is people love beautiful front ends and beautiful customer portals. But I believe people should focus on their internal processes before they focus on external things, because if you fix your internal operations, you support your internal operators, they will in turn deliver a very good customer service, right? So the focus should really be on internal things at first. And the other thing, I mean, I mentioned focus on data, master data, right? You need to treat your data with care. And one last thing for me, it's really important to invest in the right people. It's not so many people that are good at bridging the technology and the operations that have a good understanding of both. And these people are very, very valuable, right? And they need to be invested in, and they need to be groomed. They need to be potentially also brought up, right? This is a critical function that also I think is a little bit underestimated in the space, which I would recommend, to really pay attention to.
I would love to keep on going on this because this is like dear to my heart, this topic. But we have a bunch of questions from the audience, and I want to make sure that we address those as well. And maybe we just need a second episode to keep on talking about this. The first question I want to direct that to Nikolaus and Marty is there was a question about the smart containers, and we see that companies like Hapag-Lloyd, other carriers starting to fit sensors, GPS sensors, but also other sensors on the containers to track and trace. Plus the other benefits, keeping track of the cargo, understanding conditions inside the container. How ready do you see the industry for full-scale implementation of such sensors across the container fleet, and what will that contribute to the broader realm of the industry? And do you actually think that carriers will be making that information and data available to their partners?
I'm happy to. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, so first of all, I'm very glad that it takes place, right? GPS is a technology, I believe, almost since over 20, 30 years available. So now also it takes place in the container industry. The GPS modules will be made available also from the carriers. If it is already on a scale, well, I doubt it, because still also not all carriers do know how much inventory or container, right, they have in their fleet. So I believe they also still need to find all the container boxes around the globe to equip them. But definitely, it's the momentum, right? And it's crucial to have also the GPS data available, that we also can use it and also make predictive data also available. So it definitely will come around. Well, when we will see it, right? So hits the ground, I believe it will take some 2-3 years, right? Then to see it, right? Even in the rail industry, for example, it already takes place, right? But still, on the ocean world, there's still definitely some miles to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in the space, so I should be a bit careful, and I've been out of this for a little while now, but I believe also you have to differentiate, right? This a little bit, because you know, you have clip-on units that don't need to always be on the container, that you might need for certain commodities, right? Where you want to track certain things, not just the positioning, but you actually want to track the moisture in the container, right? The humidity and other things for certain commodities. So for that is obviously crucial. But I believe it's still, for me, it would be very important to focus more on tracking milestones and then tracking potentially assets that don't always have to be the container, right? If the container checks into the terminal, maybe that's good enough for you to know, right? The container, it's important that you know that the container is on the vessel, but then you track the vessel, you don't track the container, right? So I think these gateway transfers are really important to have properly recorded, and whether that's done by a device, yes, devices can help with that, but I don't think you necessarily need devices that can be tracked through GPS all the time. I mean, I think we're still not in position to track vessels through GPS, right, on a constant basis. So, you know, now starting to do that with containers, I think there's still going to be some steps needed to get there, and maybe not needed immediately, right? But other things are more important maybe to focus on.
Cool. Thank you. I hope I managed to get two answers regarding the GPS trackers and the smart containers answered for this. There was another question to you, Nikolaus. What solutions are there for recording, cleaning, and integrating master data? Do you have any recommendations, because you spoke about that master data earlier?
Cleaning and integrating master data. I mean, yes, of course, there's a ton of solutions out there, and I mean, there's middleware, right? There's specific middleware that you can use. There's also dedicated companies out there that focus on nothing else but on cleansing data, right? So you can really employ dedicated companies for this. What for me, you know, is quite important, and it really depends on the use case. The company I worked for previously is called Slink.io. They had a very interesting approach where they had a mixture of different things. They were not only, you know, they were a bit of a middleware, a bit of a business process management software that also had a UI for certain things to also look at data and manipulate data, because sometimes it's a process where, again, you want to have the human as well as the system involved, right? It's not either or in some cases, right? The human also needs to look over certain things and maybe manipulate data in certain areas. So again, a system that gives you some flexibility, that is not just a pure middleware, or I think that is also a good solution for certain cases, if that makes sense.
I hope that answered the question. We have another one here, and that's interesting. With the digitalization of the FLA forms and setting up FLA assist in the digitalization of the supply chains, I think, will it assist? Yeah, sure, but I assume, and interested to hear your take, it again depends on the systems that stakeholders use and whether they can integrate these standards. What's your take here, Marty? Any input?
I'm there, kind of a view, Leonard. Definitely, there will be it continues to be exist, but again, it's also really a matter of the stakeholders, and I believe this is something maybe in our space not we really can control or really steer on moving it away or not. Need to invite a stakeholder next time for a webinar to answer that.
Any input from you, Nicolas? Franzi? Anyone has a smart thought here?
I don't have a particular opinion on this. My apologies.
Yeah, like from my perspective, I mean, with all the standards that are being brought to the industry, and maybe digital documents, etc. The challenge that we see at Exchange is that many companies do not yet work with these standards, cannot accept the data format, cannot get the data into any meaningful system. So in the end, that still ends up in inboxes somehow. I mean, just what I see with EDI messages, which have been around in the industry for many years. For a lot of our customers, if they don't integrate with our software to read those EDI messages automatically, be it from container depots, for example, those EDI messages end up in email inboxes and then are manually overtyped. So it's again coming down to SMEs also adopting these new technologies, maybe finding a technology service provider out there who can support them in getting access to these data standards, integrating with those standards. That would be my take, fairly generic answer, but I hope it answered the question. So now I'm getting prompted that I'm supposed to wrap up, but maybe one last question here for you, Marty, or you know what, you can reply to that question afterwards. We do that via email, and then you can give us a concise answer. That's about your booking portal at Gebrüder Weiss, that I'm curious about now as well. I'm gonna go check it out. Yeah, we're already at time. This went by very quickly. Again, really appreciate Marty, Franzi, Nicolas, you guys taking the time to talk to me about this. I hope our audience took something away from the discussion. The recording will be sent to all the attendees via email. We're also going to share out our related market research report, and any questions that been asked throughout this session will also be addressed via email. So besides EDI messages and other data that you need to get out of your inbox, you'll also get some answers to the questions you asked here into your inboxes. Hope everyone could take something away. We have 60 seconds, so any of you can do like a short last statement if you like, 20 seconds max. Maybe starting with Nicolas here.
No, it was great. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It was really interesting discussion. I hope, I mean, in some areas, it may have been a bit high level. It really depends very much on specific kind of use cases, what tool the best one might be to use and what the best approach is. So some of it may sound quite, I hope it didn't sound too general. But yeah, I would be excited to kind of deep dive on a few topics in some more detail. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I would love that, and actually going to talk to our marketing team if they maybe can share out a poll on topics that the audience would want to go deeper on, and then maybe we can find another slot to actually deep dive into certain areas. Any last famous words from you, Marty or Franzi?
Yeah, first of all, also thank you for inviting me to have an opinion about digitalization, and definitely I also would like to frame it in the words also how we in the GW call it. We have to take the best of both worlds. So it's the human thing and also the digital part. Once we can link both, most seamless, right? I believe also we will also go with the digitalization a successful road, and definitely we are just at the beginning, right, of digitalization, and still a lot of plenty of work and diverse work ahead of us.
I can agree. I felt this was very inspirational for me. Like I'm gonna go back to my desk, and I am definitely reminded of why I'm spending all my time in this industry and trying to improve things here. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here.
Great. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Hit us up on LinkedIn if you have specific questions to any of us. We're always excited to talk about logistics and digitalization. And hopefully see you soon, everyone. I really enjoyed this. Have a great rest of the day. And see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.